The form arrived on a Tuesday, which was how Yevaal would always remember it. Not because Tuesdays held any particular significance in the forum's administrative calendar, but because he had been in the middle of a particularly satisfying stack of trade permit renewals when the new document appeared in his processing queue, and the interruption was mildly inconvenient. He opened it without ceremony. Species designation, Homo Sapiens. Common name, human. Action requested, voluntary withdrawal from Galactic Forum membership. Effective date, 30 standard days from date of filing. Authorization signature, Ambassador David Chin, Senior Representative, Human Delegation to the Galactic Forum. Yevaal read it once, then read it again, not from interest but from professional habit. A filing clerk reads things twice. He checked the formatting. Correct. He verified the authorization signatures. Valid. He confirmed the 30-day notice period met the minimum requirement under Membership Procedure Article 7. It did. He confirmed the withdrawal fee had been prepaid. It had. Every form in the proper order, every box properly filled, the kind of paperwork that made a career bureaucrat feel, in a small and private way, professionally satisfied. He stamped it, filed it under Membership Changes, Minor. Noted in the associated log that the species known as Homo Sapiens had maintained forum membership for 15 standard years, during which time they had held no major committee chairmanships, contributed no landmark policy resolutions, and maintained what his taxonomy system classified as a Tier 3 participation profile. Regular attendance, minimal policy impact, unremarkable contribution record. 300 species in the forum. One was leaving. The mathematics of that were not interesting. He opened the next trade permit. He processed 4 more before lunch and thought nothing further about it. His name was Yevaal, and he had worked in the forum's administrative department for 40 years. He was Theseri, an aquatically derived species, though they had not lived in water for 10,000 years, who retained gill slits that functioned as emotional barometers and bioluminescence that broadcast internal states to those who knew how to read it. Most species, looking at Yevaal, would have concluded that he had no internal states worth broadcasting. His bioluminescence had dimmed decades ago to a flat ambient glow that his colleagues associated with the background hum of the office ventilation system. Present, constant, unworthy of notice. His gill slits rarely moved. His resonance organ, which Theseri used for both communication and emotional expression, produced a steady, low tone that was the auditory equivalent of a filing cabinet, reliable, unremarkable, and easy to ignore. He was, in every meaningful sense, the furniture of government. The invisible machinery that processed the paper so that the important people could do important things. In 40 years, he had never attended a council session, never spoken to an ambassador, never participated in a decision of any significance. He processed forms. He filed documents. He maintained records. He did this well, consistently, without drama, and went home at the end of each day satisfied with the orderliness of his cues. This was his life, and he had never thought to question it. It would not occur to him filing that withdrawal form that he had just processed the most important document he would encounter in 40 years of service. Numbers don't announce themselves as significant. They just sit in the archive, waiting for someone to look. He would look, eventually. But not yet. The first report arrived 6 weeks after the human withdrawal, routed through the Security Directorate's monthly incident summary. Pirate activity in the disputed corridor had increased 40%. The Directorate flagged it as anomalous. Yevaal processed the accompanying investigation report, which had been assembled by a junior analyst who had done competent work, and reached an unambiguous conclusion. The increase correlated precisely with the cessation of volunteer patrol activity along 3 specific routes through the corridor. Yevaal cross-referenced the patrol records. They were in his archive. He had filed them himself. He pulled them up, because that's what you do when there's a discrepancy. You check the source documents. Voluntary auxiliary security, unpaid. He had dozens of them, hundreds actually, once he started counting. Human patrol requests filed regularly over 15 years, covering routes through the disputed corridor that no other species had claimed because the corridor had no strategic value to anyone except the people who lived near it and needed it to be safe. 3 ships in constant rotation, funded entirely by the human government. No reimbursement from the forum, no requirement to file. They'd simply requested the routes and then run them, month after month, year after year, ships crewed by human personnel who were spending their time in a stretch of space that offered them nothing except the knowledge that it was slightly less dangerous than it had been before they got there. Yevaal stared at the stack of forms. He had processed every one of them. He had never, not once, considered what they added up to. He filed the security report, made a note, a bureaucratic notation, nothing more, and returned to his queue. But something was different now. Some small, barely functional part of him that had been dormant for decades had stirred. Not dramatically, not in any way he could name, just a faint, nagging awareness that the numbers he processed every day had a shape he hadn't been looking at. He told himself he would look at it later. He was very good at later. Month 3 brought the refugee center. The report came through the Department of Displaced Persons, a form requesting emergency staffing authorization for Station Vega 7's processing center, which had closed following the withdrawal of its human personnel. 80% of the center's staff had been human volunteers serving on 6-month rotations. When the humans left, the center submitted staffing requests to 17 species delegations. None responded. After 4 weeks, the center closed for lack of personnel and redirected its caseload to an overcrowded facility 2 systems distant. Yevaal processed the closure documentation and the redirection paperwork, standard forms, routine routing. He was midway through stamping the transfer confirmation when a number in the attached capacity assessment caught his eye. The Human Staff Center had processed 12,000 asylum claims per year. The replacement facility processed 3,000. He sat with that arithmetic for a long moment. 9,000 claims per year that would not be processed. 9,000 beings, not numbers, beings. Individuals with histories and documents and desperate reasons for having traveled to a processing center in the first place, who would now exist in a limbo created not by any decision of their own, but simply by the absence of the species that had been doing the work. He read the transfer form again. Then he stamped it. Then he filed it. But his bioluminescence flickered, once, faintly, briefly. The first time it had done anything but glow flatly in years. He wasn't sure what had caused it. He went home on time. He ate. He filed the next day's queue. He didn't think about it, because thinking about it wasn't his job and there was always more paperwork. The research gap report landed in his queue 2 months later and ran to 47 pages. The Galactic Research Consortium's quarterly review identified 14 collaborative scientific projects that had stalled due to what the report clinically termed data contribution gaps. Yevaal processed the report and found himself doing something unusual, reading past the executive summary. The gaps were all in the same categories: environmental data, biological surveys, planetary mapping, the foundational research, unglamorous, time-consuming, requiring more ships and more routes and more patience than most species were willing to commit to, that made advanced science possible. The consortium's analysis was careful and thorough and ultimately damning. In 15 years of membership, the human delegation had contributed more raw scientific data to the consortium than any other species, not because their scientists were more talented, but because they had more survey vessels running more routes into more unexplored territory than anyone else. And they had been quietly filling the consortium's foundational data repositories the way a groundskeeper fills a stadium with chairs before anyone arrives. Essential, invisible, and completely taken for granted. Without that data, 14 projects had stalled. 3 would be abandoned. 1. A pharmaceutical development program targeting a rare degenerative disease affecting the Velni had lost its primary dataset entirely and would need to restart from scratch, a delay estimated at between 4 and 7 years. Yevaal thought about the Velni who had the degenerative disease and would not have a treatment because the groundwork data was gone. He thought about this for an uncomfortable amount of time. His bioluminescence flickered again, and this time it stayed changed. Not a flicker, but a dimming, a slight darkening that his medical texts would classify as subconscious stress response, the thesauri equivalent of a frown you don't know you're making. He filed the report. He logged the notation. He returned to his queue. He did not return to his regular hours that evening. He sat at his desk longer than he should have, not processing anything, just sitting. It was the first time in 40 years that sitting at his desk had not felt like the right place to be. The casualty report from Theta 12 arrived on a morning that was, in every external way, ordinary. Yevaal opened it as he opened everything, with professional efficiency, with the measured attention of a clerk who processes 1,000 documents and treats them all with equal care. He read the incident summary. Mining colony on Theta 12. Catastrophic structural collapse, 200 miners trapped, atmosphere compromised, life support failing. Forum Emergency Response Directorate dispatched. Response time, 11 days. He processed the first page without pausing. Then he reached the comparative data footnote, added by the reporting analyst. Previous average response time for incidents in this sector, 14 hours. Reason for deviation. Human emergency response vessel previously maintained on permanent standby in sector. Crew rotated every 3 months, funded by Earth government. Vessel recalled upon human withdrawal from Forum. No replacement vessel assigned. No other species volunteered for permanent standby duty in a remote sector with no strategic value. 14 hours to 11 days. He turned to the casualty report, 47 names. He was not required to read them. His job was to process the report, stamp it, file it. He read them anyway. He was not sure afterward why he had. 47 names, 47 species designations. The miners came from a dozen different worlds, all of them working in the same colony, all of them trapped in the same failing structure. 47 calls of death entries, each identical atmospheric failure during delayed rescue response. They had not died in the collapse. They had died waiting. Yevaal's bioluminescence dimmed further. Not a flicker now, but a darkening, sustained, and steady. His gill slits moved for the first time in years, a flutter so small his neighbor wouldn't have noticed it. But he felt it, the physical expression of something his body was processing that his conscious mind was still trying to refuse. He sat with the casualty report for a long time. He looked at the 47 names. He looked at the column that said 14 hours. He looked at the column that said 11 days. He did the arithmetic, which was not complicated. The difference between 14 hours and 11 days was 47 names. Then, acting on an impulse he could not have explained to anyone including himself, he pulled the human withdrawal form from the archive. He read it again. The formatting, still correct. The signatures, still valid. The 2-sentence cover statement that Ambassador Chen had attached to the filing, which was not required by procedure, but which Yevaal had processed without comment because bureaucrats don't comment on cover statements. Humanity thanks the Forum for 15 years of membership. We wish you well. He looked at the form. He looked at the 47 names. His resonance organ produced a sound that his office neighbor heard through the partition wall, a low, sustained tone, nothing like the flat, ambient hum of 40 years. The neighbor's translator rendered it, imperfectly and with some evident uncertainty, as grief. Yevaal filed the casualty report. He sat at his desk until the automated lights dimmed for the night cycle. He did not go home. He started working. What he produced over the following 3 weeks was not, strictly speaking, within his job description. It was also the most important document the Forum's administrative department had ever generated, which said something unflattering about what the administrative department considered important. He called it, with the characteristically unflashy pragmatism of a career bureaucrat, a contribution impact assessment, Homo Sapiens 15-year membership record. He pulled every document the human delegation had filed during their Forum membership and cross-referenced it against post-withdrawal impact data. Volunteer patrol requests against security incident rates, humanitarian mission reports against service coverage gaps, scientific data submissions against research project statuses, emergency response deployments against casualty reports, refugee processing filings against backlog assessments. He worked at his desk before his shift began and after it ended. He worked through meal periods. He worked with the systematic, unhurried precision of a clerk who knows that accuracy matters more than speed. His bioluminescence shifted gradually as he worked, not brightening exactly, but changing in quality, moving toward a spectrum that his medical database would later classify. When a physician friend examined him as atypical emotional expression, cause undetermined, the document was 400 pages long when he finished. Its conclusion, stated in the flat declarative prose of administrative reporting, was this: In 15 years of forum membership, the human delegation had filed more volunteer mission requests, contributed more unreimbursed resources, and performed more unrecognized service than any other species in forum history. They had done this while being denied committee chairmanships they were qualified for, excluded from policy debates they had standing to participate in, and seated in the chamber between a methane-breathing delegation's environmental containment unit and a species whose communication method produced infrasound frequencies that rattled human dental structures. They had never formally complained about the seating. They had never formally complained about the committee exclusions. They had never publicly cataloged their contributions or demanded recognition for them. They had filed the forms, done the work, and left when it became clear the forum valued neither. The invisible infrastructure of galactic civilization had been, in substantial part, human. The forum hadn't noticed because the forum had been too busy not noticing humans. Yevaal submitted the audit to his supervisor on a Tuesday morning with a brief cover note explaining its contents and his recommendation that it be forwarded to senior administration for review. His supervisor read the summary, told him it was outside his role, filed it in the miscellaneous review queue, where documents went to wait forever. Yevaal had never in 40 years gone over his supervisor's head. He understood this was a career-ending breach of protocol for a filing clerk. He understood that the proper course was to accept the decision and return to his queue. He had thought about this on each of the 17 evenings he had worked late on the audit. He had thought about 47 names and 9,000 unprocessed asylum claims and 14 stalled research projects and a refugee center empty because no one else would staff it, and a patrol corridor growing less safe by the month. He sent the audit directly to Secretary General Morath's office, flagged urgent infrastructure assessment before he could change his mind. Then he went back to his queue and waited to be dismissed. The call came not from his supervisor, but from Morath's office directly, and it was not a dismissal. It was a summons. Morath was Velanori, a species with a natural gravitas that made other species feel, instinctively, that whatever the Velanori said was considered and weighed and true. He had been Secretary General for 12 years. He had, from the look of him when Yevaal arrived at his office, read the 400-page audit twice. He was holding the document the way people hold things that have changed something for them. He looked at Yevaal for a long moment. Then he called an emergency session. The forum chamber, when Yevaal was escorted to a gallery seat he had never sat in before. The first session he had ever attended was full in the way that important sessions were full. Every delegation present, every seat occupied, a quality of attention that you could almost hear. Morath stood at the central podium. Yevaal's audit was displayed on the chamber screens. Not the summary, the full document, the numbers. Morath read them aloud. He didn't editorialize. He didn't need to. The numbers spoke with the indifferent authority of arithmetic. Patrol hours in total across 15 years of volunteer service in the disputed corridor. Humanitarian missions filed and completed, with the forum's contribution to their funding, 0. Scientific data submissions to the consortium as a percentage of total submissions, 31% of all foundational data from one species out of 300. Emergency response deployments, and the average time to response before and after the withdrawal. Asylum claims processed, and the current processing rate of the replacement facility, the 47 names from Theta 12. He read those too. The chamber was very quiet when he finished. Yevaal watched delegations that he had never met, from species he had only encountered as names and filing codes, sit with the numbers in front of them. Then Morath said the thing that Yevaal would remember for the rest of his career, spoken in the flat tone of a person reading a verdict they haven't written but cannot contest. For 15 years, we allowed a member species to do the work we wouldn't do, in the seats we wouldn't give them, with the recognition we wouldn't offer. When they left, we called it a minor departure. The chair they left empty has since told us what we should have known while they were sitting in it. 3 delegations attempted to reframe the data. Morath declined to engage with the reframing. Numbers don't spin. He'd spent 40 years watching them refuse to. The forum voted to send a diplomatic delegation to Earth. Yevaal learned about this afterward, from the official motion that came through his queue for filing. He processed it, stamped it, and placed it in the appropriate folder. Then he noted with the precise and unsparing attention to detail that had made him excellent at his job for 40 years, that the motion used the word request, which was diplomatically careful, and that the delegation's mandate included authorization for full apology, committee chairmanship offers, seat relocation, and formal recognition of historical contributions. They were going to Earth to apologize. He wondered if they understood that an apology was not the same as having deserved the absence in the first place. The delegation's report, when it came back, passed through his queue 3 weeks later. He read it as he read everything, twice. They had expected to find a bitter, withdrawn species nursing grievances and waiting to be courted back. Instead, they had found a civilization that had used the 15 months of its forum absence to do precisely what it always did: get on with things. Human colonies were thriving. New trade networks had been established with non-forum species who turned out to be perfectly adequate trading partners. The economy was stable. No one was waiting by the door. Ambassador Chen had received the delegation politely. The report noted this specifically, the politeness as though it had been unexpected and slightly disorienting. He had not said yes. He had not said no. He had said, "We'll consider it." But first he wanted to show them something. The something was a military command center and 3 vessels on a display screen. The report included a transcript of the exchange with Commander Reyes, whose ship was one of the 3. The delegation had asked why she was still operating in forum space when humanity had withdrawn from the forum. The transcript rendered her response as follows: "We left the forum. We didn't leave the people." She had explained the distress calls, mining accidents, pirate attacks, medical emergencies in the border systems, that the forum's response infrastructure, hollowed out by the gaps humanity's absence had left unfilled, had not been catching. Her crew had been catching them, without authorization, without orders, because they heard the calls, and there was a thing they could do about it. And it hadn't occurred to them to let that thing go undone, just because the politics had gotten complicated. Yevaal read the transcript paragraph twice, then a third time. He was aware that his bioluminescence had been doing something he couldn't quite classify, and had been doing it since he'd started reading the report. He checked his reflection in the darkened screen of his terminal. The color was unusual, warm, not the flat ambient glow of 4 decades, something that looked, if he were being unscientific about it, like the color of a light coming on. The transcript continued. Shen, in the command center, with the forum's delegation standing behind him watching human ships patrol space. They had no obligation to patrol. We'll come back. But not because you asked. Because they need us. A pause. Fix our chair. We'll sit in it. But we were always coming back. We just needed you to understand what the chair was for. Yevaal filed the report. He sat quietly for a while afterward. The readmission ceremony was on a Thursday. He knew this because the ceremony request had come through his queue, and he had processed the venue booking and the formal notification documents in the official readmission form with the same efficient care he applied to everything. He was not at the ceremony. His job was not ceremonies. His job was paperwork. He was at his desk when the chamber filled and the speeches happened and the applause occurred, and Ambassador Chen presumably gave a brief and dignified statement, and everyone filed out to their delegations and resumed doing what they had been doing before, which was everything except noticing what was being done for them. His queue that afternoon contained the first post-readmission documents from the human delegation: trade notification forms, committee registration requests, seat change confirmation, and at the bottom, filed with the same unremarkable efficiency that had characterized every human filing he processed in 15 years, a voluntary auxiliary security request. 3 ships, 3 patrol routes, the disputed corridor, no reimbursement requested, crew, human volunteers, 3-month rotation. The form was identical to the hundreds he had processed before, same format, same category, same unassuming presence in his queue, easy to stamp and file without thinking about what it meant. He held it. It had a place in the system. Voluntary auxiliary security, unpaid. He had categorized every previous one of these the same way. Minor, routine, efficient and correct, and completely blind to what the document actually represented. He looked at it for a long time. He thought about 47 names. He thought about 9,000 asylum claims in limbo. He thought about 14 stalled research projects and a plague treatment reset to 0. He thought about a corridor that had gotten more dangerous the moment the form stopped coming. Then he did something that no clerk in the administrative department had done in the 40 years he had worked there. He added a personal notation. The notation read, "Processed by Clerk Administrator Yevaal. Note, this document represents a voluntary contribution of resources by a member species at no cost to the Forum. It is the 327th such document filed by the human delegation. Previous documents in this category were filed under minor routine. This designation has been revised. New designation, essential priority." The humans never stopped doing the work. We just stopped noticing. He held the form a moment longer. His bioluminescence, visible in the reflection of his darkened terminal, was warm. Steady, not dim, not bright. Warm. A color his office neighbor, pausing in the doorway to say goodnight, stopped and looked at, because in 40 years of working beside Yevaal, she had never seen it before. He filed the form. "Long day?" she asked. He considered the question with the thoroughness of a clerk who processes things carefully. "No," he said, "I think it was exactly the right length." His resonance organ hummed, not the flat ambient sound of decades. Something that took her a moment to recognize. The sound, she would think later, of someone who has found the thing their work was for. He went home. He slept. He came back the next day and processed his queue. But every human form after that, every patrol request, every humanitarian mission filing, every volunteer deployment, every quiet and unglamorous act of service logged in triplicate and submitted to a system that had barely noticed them, received its notation, essential priority. He built a new index. He maintained a running total. He made the invisible thing legible, one form at a time, the only way a filing clerk can change the world. He was, after all, the person who kept the paperwork. Someone had to understand what it meant.